The hum of the workshop was constant, a low, mechanical purr that echoed to the concrete walls like a heartbeat too stubborn to stop. It was nearly drowned out by the harsh rasp of Roan Vex's breathing. He sat hunched over a rust-streaked workbench, fingers stained with oil, sweat pooling in a hollow of his throat where metal met flesh. A copper coil sparked in his grip before he tossed it aside with a grunt. The prototype wouldn't hold. Like everything else in his life, it was breaking down. Roan wasn't young anymore. The mirror, when he dared to glance at it, showed a face carved from regret, leathery skin weathered by war, a silver beard that could never quite hide the scars slashing from temple to jaw. The cybernetic eye glowed faintly, scanning the air for threats that hadn't come in years. His enemies were all ghosts now, most of them buried beneath sand or steel, but the poison they left behind still churned in his blood. The toxin from the war, synthetic, nameless, was killing him slowly, eating his nerves, dissolving tissue with clinical precision, and Corinth knew it. The dragon was too large for the workshop now. He lay coiled behind Roan, his emerald-scale body pressed against a reinforced wall, glowing faintly in the dim light like a living jewel. The tips of his wings brushed the ceiling, folded tight with restraint. One eye remained half-lidded, sapphire and liquid, watching Roan work with a quiet intensity that never wavered. He made no sound. Dragons rarely did unless they needed to. Roan didn't look at him. Couldn't. He'd raised Corinth from the size of a house cat, rescued from a battlefield laboratory where the creature had been kept sedated and starved, a curiosity rather than a weapon. Against orders, Roan had fled with a hatchling tucked in a stolen cryopod, hiding out in fractured outposts during the final days of the war. That was 20 years ago. Corinth had saved his life more times than Roan could count. When the toxin first started showing symptoms, hallucinations, tremors, bleeding that wouldn't stop, it was Corinth who stayed. Everyone else had vanished. The government, his unit, the tech medics. Gone. He kept breathing because of the dragon's warmth, his watchful presence, his terrible patience. But Roan didn't believe in loyalty anymore. Not really. Loyalty got you burned. He keyed in a few commands on the terminal. The screen flickered, loading a schematic in icy blue, a neural stem regeneration unit. Illegal tech. Off-grid, bioadaptive, rumored to slow cellular degradation. Prohibitively expensive. The kind of thing men killed for. And the seller wasn't interested in credits. The offer had come 3 days ago, slid into his inbox under a scrambled signature. One live asset, Class 5, draconic species, equals full neural core plus implant suite. No haggling, no negotiation, just the cold arithmetic of survival. Roan closed the screen and rubbed his temple. His body ached. He'd barely slept, and his fingers trembled even when still. He could feel his heart trying to drag itself forward, trying to keep him on his feet, trying to win a battle already lost. "You're dying," a voice said behind him. Not a voice in the traditional sense. More resonance in his skull, the way a tuning fork might sound inside bone. Roan flinched. He hadn't realized Corinth had moved. The dragon's head was beside him now, close enough that his breath fogged the metal of Roan's chair. The beast's voice had no accent, no inflection. It was neither male nor female. It simply was truthful, unignorable. "I know," Roan replied. "Horse, you think I've forgotten? You're selling me." Roan didn't answer. "You've already agreed," Corinth said. "They'll come for me in the morning." Roan stood abruptly, as if motion could ward off the shame clawing at his spine. "It's the only way," he snapped. "Do you think I want this? You think I want to trade you like some biolab specimen? I'm out of options." They said this tech. "It won't cure you," Corinth said. "Calm. Certain. It'll buy me time. Time to regret." Roan slammed his fist onto the bench, sending tools scattering. He turned on the dragon, his voice cracking. "What do you expect me to do, huh? Just wait for my insides to liquefy? Lie down and die like a dog? I gave up everything to keep you alive." "You gave up everything," Corinth echoed. "And now you're giving up me." There was no anger in the words, no accusation, just the hollow weight of truth. Silence settled over the workshop. A storm of emotion swirled inside Roan. Fury, guilt, desperation. He hated how still the dragon was, hated the clarity in his eyes, hated that somewhere, deep down, he knew Corinth wasn't wrong. He slumped into the chair, burying his face in his hands. The trembling had spread now, seizing his arms. The toxin was accelerating. Soon even the implants wouldn't keep his lungs functional. "I'm tired," he whispered. "I know," Corinne said again, but this time the words carried something different. Not sympathy. Dragons didn't express human emotions, but there was weight to the statement, a recognition, a shared exhaustion. That night, Roan drank from a cracked flask, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. The faint lights of the outpost blinked outside the window. Corinth lay curled again in the dark, his breathing deep and slow. The dragon said nothing else. He didn't need to. By dawn, the transport had arrived. Unmarked, clinical. 2 operatives stepped out, faces masked, movements sharp. They didn't speak to Roan. They didn't need to. The trade was already sealed. A briefcase of gleaming tech modules changed hands. Roan didn't open it. He couldn't look. Corinne stepped forward without resistance. No bindings. No sedatives. He paused only once, right at the threshold, turning his great head back toward Roan, who stood frozen in the shadows. Their eyes met. For one breathless moment, Roan wanted to scream, to call the deal off, to tear the briefcase open and hurl at the operatives, to take up a rifle and die trying to save the last thing that had ever meant anything. But he did nothing. Corinne turned away and stepped into the cage. The doors hissed closed behind him. Roan stood there long after the transport had vanished into the gray sky, the cold wind scraping at his cheeks. He didn't move until the ache in his joints forced him to. Inside, the workshop felt dead. Not quiet. Dead. He sat at the bench again, staring at the unopened case. He activated it slowly, like he was defusing a bomb. The modules glowed to life, sleek, efficient, pulsing with promise. Life extension, neural clarity, organ reinforcement, everything he needed to survive. But Roan couldn't stop shaking. Not from the toxin, not from age, from the silence. And for the first time in years, he realized how little he actually wanted to live. Yet he would. For now, he owed it to the creature he had just betrayed. And somewhere, deep in the marrow of his bones, he knew the story wasn't over. The first few days without Corinth passed like broken teeth grinding in Roan's gut. The workshop was quieter now, but not in the way he'd imagined. There was no peace in the silence, only absence. He found himself reaching for the dragon's low, rumbling presence in the corner, only to meet the chill of empty concrete. The new tech modules hummed with sterile efficiency, integrated into his neural spine and lungs, whispering false promises with every pulse of borrowed energy. His hands no longer trembled. His coughing fits had subsided. The edge of death, once sharp and immediate, now receded like a predator just out of sight. But Roan didn't feel stronger, only emptier. He walked slower, not from pain but from weight. Memory weighed more than any illness ever had. The workbench he had once leaned over for hours felt foreign now, the tools arranged like relics from a life that had already ended. He kept the bench clean, for no reason other than routine. And at night, he didn't dream, because dreaming required hope. Then the message arrived. It came as a burst of static through a decrypted channel he hadn't used in over a decade. An old wartime frequency embedded into the data layer of his optic implant. A ghost signal. Roan froze when the signature appeared. Lyra A. She'd been a name etched into the corners of memory, almost myth now. Dr. Lyra Asen, military biogeneticist, war criminal in some circles, savior in others. One of the last people alive who truly understood the genetic architecture of dragons. He hesitated, then opened the file. The message was short, encoded in voice and pulse-wave bursts. They're carving him up. Corintha's genome, it's adaptive, unique. It's stabilizing the toxin. I ran projections off archived blood samples. His DNA is mutating to counteract the decay in your cells. Roan, he wasn't just bonded to you emotionally. His body was building a cure. The word struck like a round to the chest. Roan sat motionless as her voice replayed in loops, his mind tearing through decades of field logs, diagnostic screens, conversations long forgotten. Corinth had always lingered near him when symptoms flared, always more alert when Roan's body deteriorated. It wasn't coincidence. It was connection, biochemical empathy, evolution in motion. He had traded away the only cure that mattered. Roan surged to his feet, fury seething beneath his skin. His boot smashed into the metal case of the implant suite, sending it skidding across the floor. He didn't care. He felt poisoned again, not by the war-born toxin, but by guilt, pure and consuming. He tried reaching Lyra again, digging through encrypted nodes and ghost networks. She answered 4 hours later, her voice tight and weary. "They've got him in Fort Nexus. You know the place." "Floating lab off sector," Roan muttered. "Black site, corporate-controlled. Worse, independent now. No regulations. They'll splice him for profit and patent his code to the highest bidder. You'll never see a fragment of it. I'm going to get him back." There was silence on the line. "You think you're still a soldier?" she said, almost gently. "You'll die before you breach their perimeter." "I'm already dying," he said. "I just don't intend to die worthless." Another pause. "I'll help," she said finally, "but you'll need someone who can punch through their AI defenses. You remember Vesk?" Roan grimaced. "The kid with the drone swarm?" "Not a kid anymore. He owes me." "I'm not dragging anyone else into this," Roan growled. "You don't have time for pride. I'll route him to you. Gear up." The line went dead. Roan stood there for a long time, staring at the cold metal walls of his outpost. He could already feel the ache in his limbs returning, not physical, but spiritual. The kind of pain that only truth can cause. That night, Vesk arrived. He was leaner now, sharper. Cybernetic plates lined his jaw and spine, his right arm entirely replaced with polished chrome. His eyes were augmented too, glowing blue beneath a hood. Despite the upgrades, he still moved like the wiry teenager Roan remembered, restless, quick, dangerous. "Didn't expect to be answering your call," Vesk said, looking around the workshop with something between nostalgia and disdain. "Didn't think you were still breathing." Roan offered him a curt nod. "Regret's a hell of a motivator." Vesk smirked. "So, we're stealing a dragon from the most secure floating lab in the hemisphere. Fun. Rescuing." Roan corrected. "Sure. Same difference to a gun drone." They spent the night planning. Lyra patched in via holostream, her face drawn but alert. The schematic of Fort Nexus spun in the air above the table, an angular fortress of metal and storm glass, suspended in the stratosphere by anti-grav engines and guarded by tiered security. Kinetic turrets, biometric gates, and neuroejectors that could scramble unauthorized thought patterns. "Corinth is in Biovault C," Lyra explained. "He's sedated, restrained. They'll start gene isolation in less than 72 hours. "We won't need that long," Roan said. Vesk glanced at him sideways. "You've got a plan?" "I go in loud. You stay outside, kill their communications. Lyra spoofs access for the elevator. I get to the vault. We extract him. And then..." Vesk asked. Roan didn't answer right away. "Then we fly," he said at last. "As far as we can." In the morning, they launched. The skimmer was small, black, untraceable. Vesk piloted while Roan armored up in the back, his old war leathers, reinforced with carbon threads and impact gel. It felt tight across the chest, not because of age, because of purpose. By the time Fort Nexus came into view, the sky had turned violet. The lab hung above the clouds like a god's monolith, bristling with antennae and gleaming vents. Roan could see the glimmer of shield walls wrapping its sides, and farther below, the shimmer of drone clusters patrolling the airspace. "Once we punch through, they'll lock every exit," Vesk said. "If you're not out in 20, I leave." Roan nodded. "If I'm not out in 20, I won't be leaving at all." The skimmer dove. Alarms flared instantly, red pulses lighting up the night sky. Railguns swiveled. Drones scattered. Vesk launched a disruption swarm, thousands of mirrored spheres flooding the air, confusing targeting systems with false signatures. Roan jumped. He hit the top platform with a hard roll, armor absorbing most of the impact. A drone screamed past him, laser sight flickering. He shot out of the air with a plasma burst and ran for the elevator shaft, ignoring the searing pain in his side. Inside, the corridor smelled like antiseptic and blood. He fought like he was young again, faster than the guards expected, dirtier than protocol allowed. A knife in the gut, a stun round the throat. He didn't care. Time was muscle. Every second cost. The vault was colder than the rest of the facility. Steel doors layered with biometric locks. Roan forced Lyra's override chip into the console and waited, breath ragged. The door opened. Corinth lay on the floor, barely breathing. Wires fed into his veins. His wings had been clipped, sliced and bound. His scales dulled to gray-green. His eyes, half-lidded, flicked toward Roan. For a second, there was nothing. No recognition. No hate. Then, the faintest flicker of something deeper. Roan dropped to his knees. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "I was wrong." The dragon blinked once. Then his body surged. Machines screeched as Corinth tore free of his restraints. Tubes snapped. Monitors shattered. He rose, tall and terrible. The wind was vicious above the clouds. Their stolen skimmer tore through the stratosphere. Tail rudders failing. Shields flickering like a dying star. Corinth lay curled in the cargo hold. His breath shallow but steady. The cuts on his wings scabbing over with eerie rapidity. His body was healing, but his mind remained quiet, distant. The sedation had gone deeper than either of them had expected. Roan sat beside him, one hand pressed to a leaking gash along his ribs. His armor was scorched in 3 places, and the pain in his lungs returned with vengeance, sharp, dragging, but familiar now. He welcomed it. Even, the pain meant he was still here, still breathing. Vesk cursed from the cockpit. "We're burning up. We lost primary thrust. I can't hold altitude." Roan didn't answer. His eyes stayed on the dragon. "Corinth," he said, voice barely above a rasp. "You in there?" A slow blink. Roan leaned closer. "They took a piece of you, but not the best parts." Corinth stirred slightly, his tail twitching. A faint pulse echoed between their minds, a throb of something old and forgotten. "You risked everything," the dragon murmured inside Roan's skull, his voice like cracking stone and thunderclouds. "And you're still dying." Roan nodded once. "Was always the deal. But it doesn't have to be." That sent a chill down Roan's spine, colder than the bleeding wound or the failing ship. "What do you mean?" Corinth shifted, his claws curling slightly against the grated floor. "They found what I was becoming. How my body adapted to your damage. I was changing for you. I still can." Roan felt his heartbeat spike. "You're talking about a transfer." "Fusion," Corinth corrected. "Genomic symmetry. It's not perfect. It may burn us both. But there's a chance." Corinth's eyes locked onto his. "Only if you trust me again." For a long moment, Roan couldn't speak. His hand trembled as it reached toward the dragon's scale brow. The last time he had let this bond deepen, it nearly consumed them both. Dragons didn't just share thought. They changed it, warped it, wove it. But this time, he was afraid of change. He was afraid of leaving nothing behind. "I trust you," Roan said. The ship lurched violently as a second engine blew out. Vesk shouted a warning, but neither of them listened. Corinth reared up, wings unfolding shakily, his mouth parting in a deep growl that vibrated through the hull. Light gathered at the seams of his body, green and gold veins pulsing outward from his chest. Roan was already on his knees, unbuckling the neckplate of his armor. "Do it." Corinth lunged. It wasn't pain. It was remaking. Roan's mind exploded in color and memory and heat. He felt Corinth's heartbeat slam into his own, felt the dragon's blood thread itself into his marrow like molten silver. His vision broke apart into 1,000 fractal images, battlefields, skies, roaring flame and childhood winters. Their lives collapsed into one another, stitched together by something deeper than biology. His screams filled the ship for 11 seconds. When he awoke, the silence was complete. The ship had crashed, buried nose first into the side of a mountain ridge. Torn open like a tin can, smoke rose lazily from the wreckage, and the cold air bit deep. But Roan was alive. That much he could tell instantly. More than that, he felt different. He stood without effort. The pain was gone, his joints light, his lungs clear. He took a breath that reached deeper than any in years, and the air tasted like ice and freedom. Corinth lay nearby, unconscious but breathing. His body was twitching, as if still recalibrating. "Vesk!" Rome called. A groan answered from under twisted metal. They pulled the young man free an hour later. Battered, burned, but grinning through blood. "Remind me never to say yes to you again." Roan smiled, just barely. Noted. They made camp that night under the stars. No pursuit. No signals. Fort Nexus had collapsed into lockdown, and their extraction had drawn too much chaos for anyone to follow immediately. Roan sat beside the fire, a blanket wrapped around his shoulders, feeling the warmth of his new blood humming beneath the skin. He didn't know what he was now, not fully human, not fully dragon. Something in between. A hybrid built from war and desperation, and a bond stronger than logic. "You're changing," Corinne said quietly from shadows, his eyes catching the firelight like sapphires. "I know. You'll feel things differently, see things differently." Roan chuckled. Never saw much worth seeing before. Corinth lowered his head, touching Roan's shoulder gently. "We are not the same as we were." Roan met his gaze. "That's the point." For a while, neither of them spoke. The stars turned above them, silent witnesses to their transformation. "What now?" Vesk asked, poking the fire with a bent rod. "We disappear," Roan said. "And after that?" Roan didn't answer at first. He watched the flames dance, felt the thrum of Corinth's thoughts against his own, clearer now, smoother, like waves lapping ashore. "Maybe we help someone," he said finally. "Find others like me. Like us. People the system chewed up and spat out. Maybe we give them a choice." Vesk stared at him for a moment. "That's a long road." Roan nodded. "We got time now." The words hung there, strange and true. For the first time in years, Roan wasn't counting minutes to the end. He wasn't measuring his life in failures and regrets. He was becoming. Corinth curled beside him, warm and massive, like a fortress made of breath and memory. Their bond wasn't just survival anymore. It was purpose. The horizon would find them eventually. Hunters. Governments. Corporations hungry for the genome that had rewritten him. But until then, they would fly, and when the world came knocking, they'd answer together, with fire and fury, and the knowledge that neither of them was alone anymore. Not ever again.